Class is in session. Good evening, class. Welcome to Binary Gamer. I'm your host, Tony Spears, and I am joined for the first time in a really long time by the crew, by my bros. And I'm really really happy about that. So everybody, say hi. Say hello, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
Say hey, Kurt. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
And we are joined by AJ. Hello, AJ.
Hello.
All right. So on this show, for those that are new to us here in 2018, we are discussing games, but not just like game news and things like that. Like we're here to learn a little bit, much to the chagrin of some people, but mostly just to talk about games and just to come away with with something. We're like in those old movies, the old men like sitting around in like a hunting lodge, like talking about like politics and like, you know, the state of the empire and things like that. Except we do it about games, and there's a lot less like bourbon and cigars involved. But aside, yes, quite, yes. But aside from that, that's pretty much what it is. So this week, coming into the new year, which is freaking awesome. That, you know, hey, happy 2018, everybody! Yay, we made it. But we're going to be discussing the games that we really liked, our favorite games of last year, of 2017, and then also going to be discussing something a little more in-depth with the effect that PUBG, PlayerUnknows BattleGrounds, has had on games in 2017 and the effect we think it's going to have into 2018 and why that's important, because I think I can safely say that there hasn't been a game that's had this kind of a broad effect on other games that wasn't like Quake with like online multiplayer and things like that. Like this is, I don't know, like I don't want to say like unprecedented. Like this isn't, you know, the great shakeup of the video game genre, but there's definitely something going on. There's definitely something happening, and so that's what I want us to talk about. So before we get into that, though, let's get into our favorites of 2017. So, Kurt, why don't you start us off? Like, what is the standout game for you for 2017? Like the game that you played, maybe put the most hours into, or just like a game that you got your hands on that you just realized you really, really liked?
For me, it's probably going to be Nier Automata. The game itself, although it didn't really be anything special, there was nothing like over the top that just wowed me about it. The game was executed just so beautifully between all the different styles of combat. There's the different angles, bird's eye view, goes back and forth between that, third person, the platforming aspect to it. It was an all-around great game. And the reason I put it up at the top compared to some of the other titles like PUBG, it released without major bugs. We've come to a place in the world where everyone is releasing games with bugs in them over and over, and they're just like, yeah, we'll patch it. And this is the first time in a long time I feel like they've released a game that was solid and sound. We are no longer working with Bethesda on every development.
I do agree with you that the game came out like really well polished, and because of that, it was like one of those like almost perfect executions of like, hey, here's a game that we have put a lot of time into and it's really well made, please go and enjoy. And a lot of people did enjoy it. It does seem to me though that Nier was very much a polarizing game. I've heard a lot of people say they really liked it and, you know, just like the story and the gameplay and the characters, some of the characters, apparently not all of them. And then there are some people that just do not like that game at all, like can't wrap their heads around why other people like it. And I think it's really funny that it's that polarizing, but I don't know. It got a lot of buzz on the internet as far as like...
It just takes such a wide approach to so many different subjects rather than like severely polishing third-person style combat. They bring all kinds of styles and art types into it. They make it work for me. I like people that are willing to try new things and push the envelope. And so for me, that's why it's my game of the year. Is it the best game I played? No, but I feel like 2017 was a pretty crappy year for games altogether.
Oh, dude, I gotta disagree there. Some great games came out in 2017, bro. Like,
Oh, I don't know about that, man. I don't know.
yeah,
I mean, I think my game is one of my favorite games that I've played in the last 10 years. So,
what's that?
Divinity Original Sin 2.
Yeah, man. You know, that game
The game is fucking amazing.
Yeah, that game really got like short shrifted when it came to like other outlets like coverage for Game of the Year, and I think mostly because it only came out on PC, which that's a really shitty reason why it wouldn't get as much coverage. But yeah, that game is stupid good, man. It's so good. Like the systems in it are really deep, and I can appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. It's essentially as close as you can get to a D&D game without it being Neverwinter Nights 3. Or, you know, Baldur's Gate 3. But without actually using D&D, using their own system, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, actually, if I had to compare it to anything, I probably would compare it to Baldur's Gate, just in a different. Like it seems like it's almost like the natural evolution of those types of games where it has that, you know, the really pulled out camera angle, which obviously you can modify if you want. You can be right up in the action if you want to. But then also like the way that your actions are executed and then the way those actions interact and stuff like that is, like, you know, leagues and bounds ahead of what Baldur's Gate was capable of at the time, but still has that like that feeling of a natural progression from that type of system. I don't know if that 100% makes sense, but I think you get what I'm saying.
I definitely see where you come from. And Divinity Original Sin 2 was a great game. It's definitely in my top 3. For me, it just wasn't quite there for a Game of the Year type game because there's not enough people who can get into it, which I guess is your argument against Nier Automata as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the major knock against excuse me, against Divinity was the fact that it only came out on PC, and a lot of the games that were up for Game of the Year from, you know, a lot of different outlets like IGN and all that were stuff that came out on multiple platforms. Like was it Assassin's Creed Origins came out on damn near everything, and a lot of people were, you know, super hyped about that game and the different systems and stuff like that, and how it was a big departure from the other Assassin's Creed games. Well, it had a lot more spread, a lot more what's it called? A lot more places to go because it was on consoles, it was on PC, you know, it was on everything short of the Switch. So, like, that's, I think, where Divinity Original Sin 2 kind of got hosed, because it came out on PC, and as much as, you know, PC is really popular and has proliferated more over the course of years, it's still one of those things where a lot of people don't want to mess with the, air quotes here, complexity of PC gaming. So they're like, well, I'll just, you know, I'll skip that. I won't even think about that, and I'll go on and I'll play something else. I'll go play, you know, freaking Ghost Recon Wildlands and stuff like that, which still a good game, but yeah.
And I think that really speaks volumes to how good Divinity Original Sin 2 is. If it's still like having all these setbacks that it makes it harder to compete, and it is still in contention for these top games, it just shows how good the game really can be. It's just a hard genre, the play style for the game. It's hard for a lot of people to get into.
Well, yeah, and it's also really hard for that to transfer over to a console. Like, Divinity would not have worked on a console, honestly.
Not very well, for sure.
No, I mean, I'm actually really surprised that so many games that would be considered just, you know, like naturally on a PC were brought over to consoles. Like, Chris, I think, didn't you check out that Tooth and Tail game? Or I know you saw something about it.
I don't think so.
Well, I remember I was talking to somebody in this group about Tooth and Tail. So essentially, Tooth and Tail is a RTS game where, like, you play as mice, and so it has very much this like pre-fall of the Berlin Wall Soviet feel to it. Like, it's all about class warfare and stuff like that. And
yeah, of course, like mice do.
Yeah, yeah, you know. but it's on console, and they even say, hey, you know, okay, you can play it on PC, but even on PC they tell you, hey, play this with a gamepad, with a controller, and you know, try it out, and the game works really well with a controller. So there are those games that, you know, people are designing to branch out beyond PC, even though they would be considered, you know, classically or more traditionally is the word I'm looking for, PC games, just based on their type. But a lot of different places are taking the steps to, you know, to put it out there on other platforms and making it work on other platforms, which I think is really cool.
And some of that I think is just kind of like a business model direction. Like, for example, Nintendo doesn't really care all that much if you want to have their games or their types of games multi-platformed, because it's Nintendo. They're one of the top grossing game companies in the world, and they're going to stay that way because they know how to market to their audience and play their games and make their games and have their business model work. Other people, it's just a matter of aiming at the right audience and hoping to find something accurate. And that's why I think a lot of people try and do this whole multi-platforming thing, and then they get lost in the marketing of it as opposed to the substance of the game. Which is why for me there is no real like winner of game of the year for 2017, because the best game of the year was the hype train. There's a whole bunch of stuff coming for 2018 that I cannot wait for, but 2017 was like a total disappointment. There are some amazing games of 2017, don't get me wrong, like for example Breath of the Wild, Mario's Odyssey. I mean, just to name two for the Switch, you have Divinity Original Sin, like Kurt was talking about. There are a whole bunch of really great games, but at the same time, 2018 has some major titles coming up that are like franchise. Like, you have fanboys waiting for some of this stuff coming out. Me personally, I'm waiting for God of War 4 coming out. There is a really big one by BioWare, I think. Yeah, BioWare. It's called Anthem. It's gonna be a humongous game. It's open world. It's an RPG FPS game.
Yeah, it's essentially going to be what Destiny should have been.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, that's one of the problems that I had with this year, was Destiny 2 was not nearly as good as it should have been.
Because,
And
like I said,
that was rough for me for the whole year, really, because I was looking forward to it.
Like I said, Game of the Year was definitely the hype train. Like, so many business models just hopped on board and ran it straight through people's wallets.
I want to jump in here and just say, the whole time you've been having this conversation, AJ, I've just been hugging the crap out of my SNES Classic.
Yeah, so that's the other thing too. So there's two highlights for me for 2017, and both of them revolve around Nintendo. The first is, yes, the SNES Classic, because I got my hands on one thanks to the lovely Kurt, and I'm like, that was probably the best thing that I got my hands on this year. I'm not gonna say played, because I have played, like, I played all but 3 of the games that are on there on an actual Super Nintendo, but it's really awesome to be able to, for me to just be able to sit here. Like, I sat here one night and I was just playing through, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna play Mario Kart. And then I just blasted through like 3 cups in Super Mario Kart before I realized, like, oh man, like, I've been playing this game for like almost 3 hours. Like, I need to calm down, play something else. And then I went on and I played Super Mario World. You know, and it's awesome just how you just like switch through them and stuff. And then I finally tried out Star Fox 2, and I get what people are saying about that game now. Like, it's not a bad game, but they were really trying to do something that the Super Nintendo was not, like, it was not designed for. It was not optimized for that. So there's a lot of that game where it's like, oh, this is really cool, and it's cool that it exists, but man, it's I don't know if I would ever play this again after like 1 or 2 plays. But then I went through and I played freaking Link to the Past, and then I was like, yep, this completely justifies this entire purchase. Like, save states in Link to the Past is amazing. I don't care what anybody says, because I had so many times where I got stuck. I really thought I could do that whole game from memory again. Come to find out, Chris, I got stuck in a few places. I got stuck in the Ice Palace, like, really bad. I was like, oh my god, I know I can do this, but I was having trouble. But then aside from that, for me, like my highlight this year was Breath of the Wild, and I know that sounds like a freaking cop out, but I've played a lot of Legend of Zelda games. I've played a lot of video games in general, but that game did something really special and like put me in a special place to where I made it last as long as possible. Most of the time when I play games, because I've got kids and stuff like that and just a really condensed time schedule to play games most of the time, I try and get through a game pretty quick. Like I gave up, my perfectionist streak a long time ago. But with that game, I was like, nope, I'm going to make this last as long as possible. Because just playing the game, just exploring the game and everything was as much fun as, completing any of the side quests or the main quest in general, really. That game is just, man. The game is perfect on a lot of levels. So that's definitely that is my highlight of last year, was playing through Breath of the Wild. I spent probably 4 months playing that game, and I was just like, oh, this is so good. And then I finally was like, you know what? I'm going to go defeat Ganon. Had my kids there for it and everything. We made it a family event. It was pretty rad.
And see, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I really, really like what Breath of the Wild did in taking what is already a very well-developed, well-established fan base, and then not necessarily reinventing the wheel so much as giving them, excuse the pun, a breath of fresh air in the genre. And that's what the gaming industry needs more of. But it doesn't get it. What it gets is, oh my god, my game is so good, please buy my game, you're gonna love this game, it's the best game of the year. This magazine, that magazine, every magazine says this is the great game of the year, and there's no other game that's better, and blah blah blah. No, they just try and sell you the sell almost. It's like the industry itself it just feels like it's imploding almost. I don't know how to explain it.
I mean, I get yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Which I agree with you. And I think the hype train thing has been a pretty bad problem, especially in the last couple of years. However, there are also games that don't get on it that get squelched because they didn't do it.
Totally.
And a big one, at least, I'm not sure it was this year. I think it was last year. And Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2 was a great game.
Yeah.
Great game. But because of its timed release, it released at the same time it was last year. Not 17, but 16. But that game came out in the week between Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty.
Yeah, which is a death
It came out in the week between them. So there was a 2-week period between the two games, and they were the week between them. So they got killed. And they didn't do very good marketing. They didn't do very good advertising. There was no real hype train for it at all. But that game was great, and it just got killed because it didn't pander. And that's, a lot of companies have to do that, or the game will just die.
But see, then you also look at the inverse of that, right? You look at Titanfall 2 not doing this huge marketing campaign. They're not out there, with freaking air horns blaring in people's faces, being like, "Play our mech game." Like, they're not doing that. And then you see what happens. It undersells, underperforms. And then you have games like Battlefront 2 that everybody was hyped for. Everybody was super stoked for this game, and then it comes out and it turns into like one of the most talked about, again air quotes here, controversies in recent memory because of the whole loot box thing. So it's one of those things where like you almost can't believe what you see or what you hear anymore. And I actually kind of feel like we've gotten off on kind of a tangent, but it's still a valid point, especially for last year. Is like there were so many games that got hyped up and so many games that could have been good, and some of them, the only thing that they did wrong was release before or after another game that outdid it. Like prime example is Breath of the Wild and Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn is a really good game. it has its shortcomings like any other game. But the only reason why that game didn't do as well as it probably could have is because it released within like I think a week or 2 weeks of Breath of the Wild, and not only are you competing a new franchise against The Legend of Zelda, which is like freaking, putting Tyson against, somebody that's not Tyson, but you're also hamstringing it because you released it within a window that people are going to still be playing that other game, and it didn't get sent out to die because it still did good, but it didn't do as good as it could have. But then, like I said, you have games like Destiny 2, Battlefront 2, those games that they were really underwhelming in a lot of ways, especially Destiny 2, because once everybody got past the raid, they're like, and what am I doing now? Or like with Battlefront, the whole loot box thing and the XP grind and stuff like that, that's a whole separate thing. But like regardless, it's just, I don't know, like you almost have to take the risk anymore and just dive into something you think is interesting in order to figure out like what is really good about a game, as opposed to just being like, man, this thing has like the marketing push from hell, better go and check this out, and then come to find out it's not that good.
But then there's also games that make it through.
Yeah,
like Divinity Original Sin 2.
Mm-hmm.
That game had none of that. Like, the company wasn't even a company. That game was crowdsourced.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't have money for advertising or anything like that, and it was still the top selling game on Steam for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And they made millions of dollars. Like, but I don't know. It's just weird. The market is really odd.
Yeah, it's been a weird, I'd say 2 or 3 years where it's like games that, like some games sneak up on you, like what Stardew Valley did. And I mean, Stardew Valley and Divinity Original Sin kind of go along the same lines, where like it was either made by one person or it was crowdfunded, didn't get a lot of publicity or hype, and then all of a sudden it just blows up and everyone's like, bro, have you played Stardew Valley? Or bro, have you played freaking Divinity Original Sin 2? This game is freaking awesome. And then that's how it starts rolling, is word of mouth.
I will say I want to give special mention to my favorite word of mouth game that came across this year was Doki-Doki Literature Club.
Yeah, that game went places. That's definitely one way to put it. That game went places.
I think a lot of it just came from the fact that, yes, there's this game, and then there's this whole other realm hidden inside the game that it took people a long time to realize was there.
Yeah. That game was a lot weirder than it had any right to be, but man, I think it was weird in the right ways.
Well, you heard the game itself is an advertisement, right?
Advertisement for what?
There's this horror game that's coming out in 2018, and if you go and dig through all of the ARG stuff, I would highly recommend going through Game Theory's 2 episodes on Doki-Doki Literature Club. They talk in depth about all these extra Easter eggs that they hid into the game, like the character files that you can go in and delete.
Yeah.
If you copy one and paste it into a notepad, then it's actually a bunch of 64 hex code. You go and decode that, and it gives you this long poem written by one of the characters that gives you insight into the horror game and the characters that are involved in it, and the one that's releasing in later 2018.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, see,
like there's this whole background with it, so I highly encourage people to go check it out. I've never seen a game come out as a visual novel with a perfect 10 of 10 and 99% Steam rating.
That's so weird.
And it's free to play.
Yeah, that's just, to me, that's so, I don't know. It seems like ARG has made a huge comeback, and I think it's funny how everyone's like, hey man, have you played freaking Frog Fractions 2? And it's like, no, I didn't even know it was a thing. It's like, yeah, you should check it out. And then you look up Frog Fractions 2, it doesn't technically exist, and then you go through and you find the game that it actually exists in and everything, and it gets all weird, and there's you're playing Glittermitten Grove and it's bad. I mean, that game's not bad, that game's actually pretty good, but yeah, I don't know. ARG made a really weird comeback last year. Weird.
I blame Sombra.
So aside from Game of the Year, does anybody else have like anything they want to put a shout out to as far as like games that stood out to them?
My secret love affair with Brawlhalla. It officially released in October this year after being in beta for 2 years.
Okay. I haven't actually played. Well, no, I have played the game only a little bit, but I can appreciate what it does. But I don't know. There's other fighting games I'd rather play.
It's a great game. It's free to play, but it's nothing phenomenal.
Yeah. I don't know.
There is one game.
Oh, no,
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no! You're fine. Go ahead.
There is one game that I have been meaning to look into, and it came out in 2017. It's called Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
Oh yes.
There are some things I've heard about this game that I think it's a massive step in the right direction. Like, integrating your ability to play the game into the game mechanics itself. Like, I know I said that kind of weird, but I heard about a mechanic in the game where if you die too many times, she goes insane, a little bit more insane after every time you die, and if you die too many times, your save file gets erased.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that kind of thing is a much needed innovation that you don't really see a lot of other places, because they take not enough risks and recycle too many business models, because it's all about the business and not about the art right now.
Well, I mean, games have to make money, otherwise you don't get games. But I understand what you're saying is that you have to have these. You got to let people depart off into more the creative realm, as opposed to just being like, yo, man, how are we going to make this money? Which,
Yep.
Like games as a service, which is a phrase that's been thrown around recently that I'm not a big fan of, has definitely, that's going to affect things in the long scheme. And that's probably a different topic for another day. But I do agree with you, though, that game is cool in that it's trying to get across a message. It's trying to do something different, and it's a game that has not only that message and that work put into it, but also has a really good presentation behind it. So, yeah, good call. I think if no one else has anything else, the one thing I'm going to point out as far as the highlight games for me for this year, Chris knows, but maybe you guys don't. I am a real big fan of like run-based games, like Enter the Gungeon's kind of my jam, and different games like that. And this year, I really got into a couple of them as far as like different run-based games. And so I really liked playing Dead Cells this year, it's still technically early access, but they've done a lot of like patches and a lot of updates and stuff to it that have really improved the game, and that game is freaking rad. And then also Cryptarch, which is essentially like playing not Hotline Miami. What's the best one to put it to? It's like playing Nuclear Throne, but you're in space and you're going through like these derelict ships, trying to essentially kill the AI core so you can harvest the derelict ship. And you go through and you get different weapons and upgrades and stuff like that, different like suits to fly around in and stuff, and it's really, really cool. So definitely a shout out to those, because it's easy to make roguelikes, it's easy to make run-based games like that, but I like when they put different spins on it and put you like in a different environment or put different themes to it and stuff like that, and can make that work. That's why I think Enter the Gungeon is so great, because the way they're like, hey, we're going to do this procedurally generated roguelike, but also everything's going to be gun themed, and we're just going to slap comedy on this thing like peanut butter on a slice of toast, and it's amazing. And that, yeah, I still go back and play that game. Enter the Gungeon's freaking awesome. But all right, so if nobody else has anything else, I think we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we will get into the PUBG effect. And we're going to finally dig into that one, because that came out in 2017. And man, have we put a lot of hours into that game. All right. So we will be right back.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice.
All right. And we're back. So we're going to move into the main subject, as it were, on for this particular podcast, for this crowning what's the word I'm looking for this heading off this first episode of 2018. That's what I'm trying to say.
Inaugural?
There you go. The inaugural freaking 2018 podcast for Binary Gamer. Fuck, man. I knew I would get it eventually, or someone else would get it for me. But I do want to toss over to Kurt, though, for this particular subject to lead us out. So, Kurt, go ahead and take it away on the PUBG effect.
The PUBG effect is, at least as we are defining it, when one particular thing can come along. Yes. All right, come along and make so many other things just spoof off of something that they did right and bringing a whole bunch of other stuff together off of it. And what I think with that is the whole capitalization around the social media and everything that's even come around with it is going to be the battle royale genre. We've seen it come around with PUBG. PUBG has probably been the most effective one with it. It combines a bunch of the life aspects that have been around with shooting games, some of the survivability aspects that were around with some of the classic movies like Battle Royale and some of the newer ones like even Hunger Games. It's this entire mental perspective that has been cast onto the genre, and you essentially get to play through these new shoot 'em survival games that essentially take 2 minutes if you play like Tony and I do, or 30 minutes if you want to try and get all the way to the end and you take your time and play cautiously. And there's so many different ways to play. Like you can go in, if you go in hot like Tony and I do, we're like, all right, we're going to go in. Our goal is to shoot someone in the face. Sometimes we don't find someone for 20 minutes. And it's just like, well, at least we're ready to go when we find someone. And then they come up behind us and hit us with a pan.
Yeah, and sometimes we get shot in the face. Sometimes sometimes it doesn't work out too well for us, but yeah, it's I don't know, man. That game is special in a way because like I was playing earlier and I just hopped in. I decided to go in spicy, which that's another thing I think is funny is how like this has created its own parlance with like the fact that if I say, hey man, we're going spicy, everybody knows, like regardless of the game we're playing, we could be playing freaking Battleship and be like, all right man, I'm going spicy, and you know that means that I'm going to be playing aggressive. And essentially I got in, I got 3 really easy kills in the beginning because I just kind of bamboozled the guys, honestly. I felt bad for like 3 seconds and I was like, nah, move on. But yeah, it was that, and then I was like, all right, cool. And then I was literally coming out of a building, walking around a corner, freaking had to jump down to get down to this one spot to outrun the blue zone, and then freaking got me. And that's how the game just gets you, because it's like, hey, you're doing really good. Oh, you messed up. Now you're dead.
One or two little things you forget about, like, oh yeah, there's a giant wall of lightning that's chasing me. I should probably try and get away from this. Ooh, look, a shiny.
Yeah, pretty much. Or like just not accounting for fall damage is one of the things. Like you're trying to gauge what your fall damage is going to be, and then you fall too far, and then you just, yeah, it's bad.
All right, so bringing us back a little bit to the PUBG effect. What other things have you noticed that have come off of PUBG itself? Because there were obviously some things that were around like Battle Royale and Hunger Games that coincided kind of, well, Battle Royale being like 1998, but the stuff like Hunger Games was more current. It was in current pop culture that drop onto an island and survive for a short amount of time. But then I noticed other things that came out of it, like, what was it? Fortnite, I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah, Fortnite put in a battle royale mode, which that caused a lot of controversy in ways, because that was Epic making it, and Epic was working with Bluehole and with the guys making PUBG, so it was that weird thing. And then like just recently, Paladins, which I don't know if you're familiar, is essentially it's like the B-movie version of Overwatch. Essentially, it's a hero shooter.
Pretty good one, though.
Yeah, and I have heard good things, but like in my opinion, I'm not going to waste my time playing another hero-based shooter if I've already paid for and am playing Overwatch. I'd rather just play that, but that's just me. But regardless, so they're putting in a battle royale mode, which I don't know how that's going to work in a hero class based shooter. Like, it seems like that would imbalance the game. But
I don't know. I think if you put like 50 people onto a map, like at least with a hero-based shooter, then you could have each one build their own little 4-man squad. Like you could get one tank, one support, and you just kind of have the people try and pick people off. Or because that game has a lot of good long-range sniping or stealthing in, setting up a trap, area of effect controls, and I think it'll make for pretty decently fun to play compared to the regular 4v4, 6v6. I'm not sure exactly what they are.
But I mean, Fortnite has classes too,
Well,
they currently do it.
Yeah, they have classes, but the classes vary in specific ways. It's not like okay, so the only analog I can think of for this is Overwatch, because I don't know enough about the characters in Paladin, so I'm just going to use the characters from Overwatch as an analog for this. But like, if I'm playing as a tank, right? Say I'm playing as a Roadhog or something like that, then if we're in this big open map, like the only thing I am is a freaking bullet sponge. If I get in close to somebody, that's great. But if the other team is, or if there's another person out there that's a freaking Widowmaker and they're on this huge map and they're just freaking plinking away at me with their freaking sniper rifle, that doesn't seem really balanced. I don't know how they're going to change the fundamental aspects of the game in order to meet the battle royale format. Because like, are your characters just going to drop in, not have any weapons, and you still have to pick up weapons? Do they have their gear, but they're just like debuffed? I don't understand how it's going to work.
Well, with Paladins, a lot of the maps there's not a lot of heavy sightline maps like you would find in a Call of Duty regular first-person shooter.
Yeah.
You're very limited range. Like, even the snipers, though, the distance between like playing a sniper character in Overwatch versus some of the closer range would be like the difference between playing a Reaper and a 76 compared to like Reaper and Widowmaker. Like, yeah, there's some long range, but there's no long range instant damage projectiles. Like, it's all slow moving stuff. And there's quite a few defensive things. Like for the tanks, they have mobile. I don't think there's a mobile shield you can put up necessarily. They have stuff like you launch a shield kind of like Orissa's, and it's by a person who does stuff like Torbjorn.
Okay. But I mean, like, back to your point about Fortnite, Chris, like there are different classes in that game, but the majority of the differences in those classes, as far as what I've seen, is like there are some that are really good at like building stuff and like setting up defenses, and there are ones that are pretty good at like putting out damage and stuff like that. And when it comes to their battle royale mode, since the base building aspect of the game is still in that game mode, it kind of balances out, because everything I've seen with the Fortnite battle royale mode is that late game, like late into a match, the base building aspect comes into play, because what you want to do is build up a little base, kind of make your own little like ad hoc maze that someone's going to have to go into in order to engage you, and then you just kind of bamboozle them. Like, you set up traps and shit like that. So that's where I don't think the different classes in that game make as big a difference, as opposed to, like I said, like a hero-based shooter like Paladins or Overwatch, where, like, could you imagine playing PUBG, like the same playstyle as PUBG, with a character that moved like Tracer? Like, that would be...
Or like a Pharah?
Yeah, or like a Pharah.
That would just play Pharah every single round.
Yeah, exactly. Or play,
just fly around killing everybody.
Just launching rockets.
Jump up into the air and you get like 5 Widowmakers from across the map just shooting at you.
I mean, yeah, there would be that too, but that's in just basic ass Overwatch anyway. Like, as soon as you go airborne, there's just Hanzos and Widowmakers aiming for your head. But no, you're right. Like, there are certain classes that would be like way overpowered in the basic Overwatch, in the basic PUBG format, and that's why a lot of these games putting these battle royale modes into their game, putting those modes into their games, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I understand that it's a big deal. They shook up a lot of stuff when battle royale came out, when PUBG came out.
But they are doing it a little bit differently. That's what Fortnite has, building and stuff like that.
Yeah.
whereas like PUBG doesn't have that. So like they're doing it with a little bit of differences. Like you could probably modify a game like Overwatch to work in that kind of format. You would just have to do it in a certain way. Maybe the map's not as big as
Yeah.
PUBG's map is.
But then
But
at some point you change it so much in order to meet that in order to work itself into that play style that it's not even really the original game anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you take so much from like say Paladins or Overwatch, and you change it around to meet that format. You may as well just make another game.
Well, think of it this way. You know how League of Legends has all these different game modes that are coming out rotationally, like Ascension, Poro King. It started with people making their own custom games with like ARAM and all that, and there are completely different metas for everything. There are builds that would never work in a top-end format for champions that are almost never played, and it's all because you fit the meta to the format. It's not about fitting the format to the current meta or like balancing it in some weird abstract way. It's about letting the players define the game and then just putting out the game that you can market. That's why League has one map that they do pro gameplay on, and that's the one that's most stable with the most progressively developed meta. And then they also have threes, they have blind pick, they have draft, they have these other game modes that come out. It's about giving options, but developing for a goal. It's not about making everything top MLG worthy or anything like that. It's about specifically meeting your market and audience where they are, and then like comparing that to your business model and then meeting them in the middle.
Yeah,
And I completely agree with that. The one thing I'll build on that is Paladins was made to compete with Overwatch. Overwatch completely crushed them in that aspect.
Yes.
But they still have all of these tools available. Paladins is still this great game. And thought, okay, what could we do to make this something special? Paladins is doing what Battleborn should have done. I will end my conversation with that, because Battleborn was my biggest letdown of like the last 2 years.
Yeah, man, that game.
It was so good, and it's so bad at the same time.
Yeah, that is a sad story. But regardless, I'm not disagreeing that like these games can work if they can fit themselves into like like into certain, like putting certain pegs into certain holes and stuff like that, because everybody wants a different flavor. A lot of people don't like PUBG strictly because it's kind of daunting in a way. Like you start out, it's 100 people on the map, and 99 of them can be better than you, or just the last 3 people, and that can be daunting to some people. And then there's also kind of the time investment aspect of it, because like you said, Kurt, like a match could last 2 minutes, a match could last an hour and a half. Well, not really an hour and a half because of the way that shrink works, but yeah, like a whole 30-40 minutes. So I get what you're saying there, but it's hard for me to think of how you can implement the battle royale style into certain games. Like, I'd really need to see how it plays, because based on just the core concepts of the original game and then the core concepts of the battle royale game mode, I'm having a hard time seeing how they mesh. Like, what is it? Like, Call of Duty is going to be coming out with a battle royale mode. They've already said as much. So that game could translate to that play style. The only thing they're actually doing, if you really think about it, is making a Battlefield game, because Battlefield already does, large scale maps with a bunch of players and they're playing. The only difference is you have loadouts. So really the only thing they have to do is just kind of do like the Battlefield style of like big map, bunch of players, but take away loadouts is essentially what it's going to be. And if it has the same shooting as Call of Duty, then hey, that's pretty good. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just having a hard time seeing how it's going to mesh, but it still boggles my mind how this game has had so much influence just in the time that it's been out, and trying to think of the influence it's going to have later on is, I don't know, it's it's kind of crazy to think about, in my opinion.
And I feel like the people who created it took that World of Warcraft approach, where you go into it and you say, okay, I don't want to make the best game ever. I want to make the game that I want to play.
Yep.
And that's what they did. They didn't try to be super innovative. They just said, we want this to be polished. That's what we're going to deliver on. And if people like it, great. If not, oh well, it's a $20 game. It's not a AAA title.
Yeah.
But it was what people wanted, because it's the game that was made with passion about what the developers wanted to play.
Yeah. And I mean, that's I think one of the most important things to take away from, as we're calling it, the PUBG effect, is that it's not about trying to appeal to the entire audience. It's about trying to make a place for that audience to go. Like, for the audience you're shooting for, making a game that is going to appeal to them, and and supporting that audience. I think too many games are trying to be everything to everyone, as opposed to just being made for a certain group of people.
And I'm gonna piggyback on that one statement. I have a question for you guys. Have you noticed that a lot of the hold on, am I coming through clear?
Yeah, I hear you.
It looked like the connection was wavering.
Oh no, you're good.
I have a question for you guys. Have you guys noticed that a lot of the as you call it, the PUBG effect, a lot of those types of games that come out, they're developments of cultural classics. Basically, games that developed in gamer culture based on gamer development. Like, for example, League of Legends.
I want to take a
comes from
stab at
Dota.
this. That's right. Okay, you just beat me to the punch.
Yeah, exactly, right? So a lot of people, I mean, think of the term roguelike. Roguelike is now a determining genre in the entire video game industry, because it is based off of a game that is like Rogue. It was such a cultural phenomenon in video game development at that time that players just kind of took it and ran with it. And that's exactly what I believe we're even talking about right now entirely, because it's not just about what is now and what it's going to be. It's about where it came from, because this game, if I'm not mistaken, is like the third iteration that the developers worked on for this type of game. There was also I think it was H1Z1 that they worked on, and something else. But
it was H1Z1 King of the Kill, and then the culling, technically, but the culling was like a smaller map, smaller player count, a lot of the same mechanics. And H1Z1 is essentially PUBG, but it was a mod for PUBG, not for PUBG, for H1Z1 that ended up being broken off into its own game.
Yeah, and see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. If you were to take a game and then let player development run the course of its functionality, you would come up with a few games that ended up in the meme lord section of the internet, and we're gonna just let them stay there and die. And then you'll come up with the next WoW and the other end of it, the next PUBG, the next whatever the next one is going to be.
Yeah.
You take these games that have significant passionate investment from people who actually play these games, and they become cultural phenomenons. And that's why they're taking over the top streamed spot on Twitch. That's why they're taking over the the number 3 most played game like a few days after release.
Yeah, and I mean, and trust me, I agree with you. You're absolutely right. That like there's always that that defining moment, right? There's that game that creates a genre or does enough with a genre to cement itself as kind of like the standard,
or just a mod that makes it's a player-based driven mod.
Yeah.
That creates a whole new genre of game. Like League of Legends wouldn't exist if modders in
it's Warcraft 3,
in
right?
Warcraft 3 didn't make Dota 1.
Yeah.
If they didn't make Dota 1, League of Legends wouldn't be a game.
Yeah, wouldn't exist.
Exactly.
And it's the most popular game in the world right now and has been for several years.
Yeah.
So and that's all spawning off of some guys that built a mod for a game because they wanted to see if they could do it and see how it would come out.
Yeah,
And I mean, Dota 2 and League of Legends are both like huge games.
yeah, I mean the
And
same
those
thing
are all
can
from
be
that same thing.
the same thing that can be said for like Counter-Strike being born off of the back of Half-Life, or what's it called? You know, like pretty much any team-based, you know, like class-based shooter being, you know, a direct result of Team Fortress 2. Like there are a lot of different there are definitely a lot of different examples of that, and you're right that PUBG is still a product of that, but I think that it's much like what Chris is saying, where like Dota comes to be, and because of that, like MOBAs are born, right? It's like that, you know, it's that spark that starts an entire genre. Whereas PUBG wasn't the first, but PUBG is the one that got the formula to such a point that like that's what you want to distill into your game, because you can still take, you know, what's it, King of the Kill from H1Z1 or the culling, but those games fell off. I mean, a lot of people still play King of the Kill, but like those games don't get as much traction because of different aspects of the way the mechanics work or how the game is formulated. But PUBG is that example, like almost that direct analog of like Counter-Strike or Dota, where like that's the one that catches, that's the one that people like want to play in and work with, and that's what will be kind of considered the standard going forward. Like, does that make sense? Yeah, and I hope that's what you were getting at, AJ. With like I hope I wasn't misconstruing your point, but like that's kind of what I'm seeing it as, is like that's why I think it's important to talk about this, because it's another notch in the history of a game making a significant change in the way games are not only played but designed.
Oh yeah, totally. I can sum it up pretty succinctly with 2 points: Tetris and thievery.
Tetris, so good.
Tetris and thievery. All right.
Okay.
So I can't even remember the name of the book. It was so long ago. I read a video game development book a long time ago that was talking about one of the most addictive and well formulated points of any game is its replayability.
Mm-hmm.
Is how much can you go back to that game and still get a new experience out of it. That's why games like PUBG, League of Legends, Tetris, they all exist and have their own markets and avenues. Tetris is still alive today, if you didn't know.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That's crazy to me. This game was made that long ago. It's so simple and so basic, and there's still like apps, browser applications, phone, whatever. It's still super active because it's a very simple design. It's relatable. It's replayable. And then you have thievery. There is a book that is an industry standard in almost any creative format. It's especially in like design, like corporate design stuff. It's called How to Steal Like an Artist. And essentially what it talks about is how every creative person who ever made a buck off of anything they ever did is a thief. Because the way our brains work creatively is we compile, even unintentionally, we compile a list of like ideas and theories and just little notches on the belt of things we like, things we've experienced. And we take that into this mental file, and then it gets unleashed in whatever creative outlet that we have. So like musicians can always be tracked based on who they grew up listening to, who they developed under. That's how their style of music develops. Video games are no different. It's a visual, it's a kinesthetic, it is a auditory art medium, and it can 100% apply the same principles of stealing like an artist, because that's kind of the point I was making with the whole, it's not just where it's going, but where it came from as well, with roguelikes. That game was made in 1980, but there are still games today that rip off the same principles. That's decades, that's generational.
Yeah, it's the whole, how that phrase go, there hasn't been an original idea since 1985. Like,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
A lot of stuff is and I'm agreeing with you. A lot of stuff is different iterations on stuff. I actually watched a TED Talk that this guy, man, I can't remember his name now. I want to go look it up. But his TED Talk was called "Everything is a Remix," and essentially it's what you're talking about, where he goes through and he explains like, hey, like who really likes, I think the example he gave was Lethal Weapon, and they're like, a bunch of people raise their hand, and he was like, okay, did you know that inherently you also like, and he lists off all these different movies that you think wouldn't be like related because they're not like buddy cop action movies.
Mm-hmm.
But then he goes through and explains why the similarities of those movies have that you wouldn't think about, and why the people that like Lethal Weapon are drawn to those movies. And so the same thing, he brings up the same point with video games, where he was like, people that like Tetris don't inherently just like puzzle games. They like games where the outcome can be different, but there's still skill involved. So that's why a lot of those people really like. And then he brings up freaking Candy Crush, and he was like, who here has kids in their 30s? And this lady raised her hand, and she was like, did your son have a Game Boy? And she's like, yes. And she was like, did you play Tetris? And she's like, yes. And he was like, is Candy Crush on your phone right now? And she's kind of laughs, and she's like, yes. And he's like, see, and he makes a valid point. So a lot of the times, yeah, like the different iterations on ideas and stuff like that do play into these things. And I think it's really cool, that can be a thing, that you can take the parts and pieces of things that you like and make something new.
And I think PUBG serves as a great example of what I feel like is going to be the next generation of video game development. It's going to be people realizing that there is a very lucrative opportunity for people who, like it was said before, make the game they want to play. That phrase has been around for a while because it's effective.
Yeah.
It's very real. It's measurable.
Like, trust me, if I could have like an unlimited budget and could make a game, it would be this weird mashup of like Armored Core and the first God of War mixed a little bit with the combat system from Final Fantasy X, and then there's also some hover junker in there. Like, yeah, it's a lot of different pieces. I mean, it's essentially just a mech game, but whatever, it's still gonna be rad.
But you see, for me, that's completely different. Like, I would build an RPG that steals all of these different elements from different games. Not necessarily because those are the best elements for it, but because one of my biggest problems with RPGs is they get to a point, okay, they grow stale. And so I would love to have one that has a constantly evolving system to it. Mm-hmm. And finding a way to iterate that would be great. RPGs have gone stale. That is my statement for genres at the moment.
See, I always thought it would be really cool to make an RPG like a JRPG where each of the different characters or classes have a different like leveling mechanic. So your fighter would essentially have like a condensed version of like the sphere grid system. Your mage would essentially have a simplified version of like the materia system, and the what's it called, like your thief would have like skills based on skills based on the different equipment that they're using. So like if they have a knife, they have backstab, but if they have a sword, they have cleave, like shit like that, to where like each of the characters has a different like progression system, and just infuriate everybody because that would make some people so mad.
It is, but that's one of the great things I love about Dungeons and Dragons. There's so many different variations you can do to the homebrew classes that bring in different mechanics, different random things that weren't there before, but they may only apply in one or two situations that you were looking to get into. Yeah,
D&D is good for that because it's definitely one of those things where you make the character you want to make with the hope that something's going to happen. Most likely it won't, but that one time that thing you planned for happens that your character is perfectly suited for is probably the most satisfying moment in any game. Like in any of those games. Like the fact that Like, I mean, Chris will probably tell you. Chris had his archer all freaking set up for that Dragon Mech campaign. He was all good to go. And that time when he bounded off a wall and freaking landed a headshot into one of the guys, I'm pretty sure was pretty dope because I thought it was.
Oh boy, do I have a story for you.
Yeah, I dropped my sword 3 times by hitting it on a trash can.
Yeah, it's really good.
That's fantastic.
But I think with that though, I mean, well, unless you guys have more points to make on the PUBG effect, but I think we're pretty good to wrap it up. We've been going for about an hour now.
There is one question I would like to have people ponder.
Okay.
We've seen video games spawn off of parts of other video games, some of it coinciding with social media culture. Could we potentially see a niche popular video game come out from something that is debuted as this unique perspective from a movie that could potentially come out in the next couple of years?
Like I need an example. That's a little more complex than I think my brain can handle.
Well, it's one of those that's kind of hard to describe, but like how the movie Battle Royale didn't really take off. Like, it was a great movie, people liked it for a while, but it didn't really gain ground until Hunger Games came around.
Oh,
and it was this Battle Royale thing. And then people made PUBG based around this Battle Royale idea. So do you think we could see something else potentially come out like that?
Yes.
I have the perfect answer.
I do. Go ahead, AJ. You do yours first.
You guys ever heard of a story called Ready Player One?
Yes.
Looking forward to it.
I'm actually looking forward to the movie.
I'm so hyped for that movie. You have no idea.
Yeah. The book is really good.
But I think that's essentially the type of thing that I would be looking forward to. This conglomeration of everything that is gamer culture, everything that is the underground or the popular or whatever, everything that goes into the internet, basically, all coming out in this giant expression of social gaming.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think PUBG captures really well.
See, and like I'm gonna put this out there, and then I'll say my idea, and then we'll wrap it up. But when I was reading Ready Player One, I always thought it was funny how the Oasis is considered a game, when in reality, if you think about it, if you think about what the Oasis actually is, it's pretty much you're in the internet, and like that's it. It's just you're in the internet because you can find anything, like any and all every game or variations of games or games you want to make are in the Oasis. So essentially it's just the internet. Like that's the way I always thought about it. When they jack into the game, it's really just I'm just going on the internet. Like that's how I always thought about it. But yep. So the concept I would like to see put into a game, and it probably wouldn't be a very good game, but I think it'd be funny, is have you guys seen the movie Phone Booth? So nope. It's got Colin Farrell and Kiefer Sutherland. The biggest disappointment is that you only see Kiefer Sutherland for about like 5 minutes, and Colin Farrell is there throughout the entire movie. But essentially, Colin Farrell is I can't remember exactly why he gets in the phone, like why he gets trapped in the phone booth, or why he ends up going to the phone booth. But he's in the phone booth, he gets a phone call, and he's on the phone with Kiefer Sutherland, who has a rifle. Like, he has a sniper rifle, and essentially tells him, if you leave the phone booth, I'm going to kill you. And Colin Farrell's like, oh, no, whatever. And then he goes to leave, and like as he does, like Kiefer Sutherland like shoots someone outside the phone booth. And he's like, oh shit. And so it turns into this whole thing, like, it's a suspense thriller movie or whatever. But I'd like to see that turned into a game where like you have to stay on the phone with the guy, and then like part of the game is also like while you're distracting him and talking to him and like laying out the big story of like, why he's doing this and, like his whole bad guy origin thing, you're like on the sly trying to give clues to the police so they can find him based on like clues he's giving you on like, oh, this in this brick building that I'm sitting in, I'm sitting here thinking about how I'm going to kill you, da-da-da, and it's like, okay, he's in a brick building. I need to let the cops know he's in a brick building somewhere, da-da-da, close, and all this stuff. It's like you put these clues together to figure out where he's at, and then send the cops in to get him before he kills you or kills anybody else.
Tony, have you ever played charades?
Yeah.
Because that's pretty much what you just described to me. You're sitting there, you have a certain amount of time, you can't talk, and you have to get these people around you to figure out these clues.
So it's essentially charades with a death mechanic.
Yeah, at least that's what it sounds like you described.
Well, I mean that's
Ultimate charades.
yeah. No, it's hunger charades. There you go. It's life or death. No, is that a bad pun? That was a bad pun. All right,
charades.
But there you go. PlayerUnknown's battle charades. Oh, that was bad. I apologize. All right, so with that horrible dad joke, I think that's where we're going to sign off for this particular episode of Binary Gamer. So thank you guys very much for joining me back for the inaugural 2018 podcast. I do appreciate it, and we want to keep this train rolling. So thank you guys very much for coming on out.
Absolutely. And anytime you need me, remember, just Monica.
Just Monica. Nope. Wait, nope, I don't get the joke, but it's fine. All right. So thank you very much for listening to Binary Gamer. Remember, we are a weekly podcast that you can find on services such as iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Podcast, any of the places that you listen to podcasts on the internet, you will find Binary Gamer. We also are over on YouTube. Go over to youtube.com, search Binary Gamer, and you will find us over there. You can watch all the videos that we do. The podcast is up on there, the whole 9 yards. It's really freaking awesome. And of course, if you want to ask any questions, submit any thing to be read on the show, such as just questions you want to ask, stuff like that, then you can hit me up on Twitter at iFlipWithTheSwitch. It'll be in the description, because whenever I say it's spelled exactly as it sounds, not many people get that. So, yep, you can hit me up over there. And aside from that, that is it. So, thank you very much for listening. Happy 2018. It's going to be a great year. Go out and play some games, kids. It's going to be awesome. So, for Binary Gamer, I'm Tony Spears. My name's Kurt.
This is Cage, Kurt, whatever you want to call me. If it starts with a K, you'll probably get my attention.
Yep. So far, guys, 2018's outro is going great. All right. Class dismissed.